I mean, you may have heard the new Kiwi Prime Minister saying that mandated vaccinations never happened in that country.
I mean, there's a lot of first-person accounts of being sacked or applying for a exemption and not getting it.
The boot of the West Australian state government is on my neck.
Welcome to the 50th episode of the Aussie Wire News. Time certainly flies when you're having fun, and we've been bringing you twice weekly doses of truth, freedom and hope for nearly 6 months now. That's nearly 200 stories so far, and we're just getting started. To celebrate this 50th episode milestone, we're giving away a family pack of Aussie Wire merchandise, 2 Aussie Wire hoodies, 2 Aussie Wire t-shirts, plus some other goodies to one lucky winner. Now, to be in the running, all you have to do is be on the Aussie Wire email list. Head to theaussiewire.com and sign up for all of our emails. Every person on the email list is automatically in the running to win. Now, this is the first time we've ever done a giveaway for the public. Every other giveaway has been strictly for our insiders until now. And guess what? This is also going to be the last public giveaway that we'll be doing for at least the next 6 months. So make the most of it by heading over to theaussiewire.com and subscribing to our emails for your chance to win over $300 worth of Aussie Wire merch. Now, today we have an episode of the news as usual, but next week things will be a little bit different because the whole Aussie Wire team are heading to London to cover the launch of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. There will be 2 episodes of the news next week, but, pro tip, they're being recorded this week. So whilst those stories are important and relevant, there won't be any breaking news. Then we'll take a 2-week break from the news while we give you the best front row seats in the house at the ARC launch. We'll, of course, bring you lots of coverage over the 3 days of the launch itself, followed by a week of more coverage, including interviews, news, analysis, and coverage on all things ARC. Personally, I'm pretty excited about the ARC. It has the potential to be a really influential body that can do a lot to counter the influence of the likes of the World Economic Forum. But the proof is in the pudding. They can have all the wonderful, pro-human, lofty ideals in the world, but if they're not willing or able to turn that into something meaningful, then it's all for nothing. So we're not just there to support their ideals, we're there to hold them accountable to their ideals and to see with our own eyes whether this Alliance for Responsible Citizenship is going to be just another elite talk fest with no real-world relevance, or whether it's actually going to be the beginning of something truly influential that will impact the world for the better. Right now, the jury is still out, but we'll be there, bringing you truth, freedom and hope from inside the security cordon at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship launch. I can't wait, and it's just 2 weeks away. But first, make sure you join the Aussie Wire email list so you're in the running to win over $300 worth of merch. And as always, here's the news. Well, if there's one place I enjoy talking about even less than New Zealand, it's West Australia. But for some reason, I just can't get away from the topic because it does seem as though something very strange is happening in West Australia. It's as though they're being used as almost like a petri dish. We're seeing a lot of the worst ideas taking shape in the form of policies that are being pushed through. We saw that with the heritage laws, the Aboriginal heritage laws that were implemented and then quickly repealed. We've seen another round of gun confiscations, not happened elsewhere in Australia since 1996. We, of course, saw the iron ore curtain during COVID, where Mark McGowan was trying to compete with Daniel Andrews to be the worst premier in Australia. Something is in the water over there. So I thought I'd talk to my favourite West Australian, Kate Fantinel, and try and get to the bottom of this. Kate, what is going on with your home state? Not home state, excuse me, your adopted state. Forgive me.
Well, it is my home at the moment, but I'm not sure how much longer I'll be here because the boot of the West Australian state government is on my neck and the neck of 90,000 law-abiding shooters. We've just had a discussion paper come out this week explaining their ideas on how they're going to punish us under the guise of gun control and targeting gun crime. Now, there's lots to talk about, but the one thing that made me scream when I saw the discussion paper was they are considering judging someone, whether or not they can have a license, judged on their views, opinions, or attitudes.
Right. So this is an excerpt that you've supplied to me from this discussion paper. Now, as we record this literally came out less than an hour ago. This will go to air in less than 24 hours. So this news is less than 24 hours old as you sit here watching it, if you're watching this as it goes live. This is quite an incredible and Orwellian moment. This, if you have a read of it, and I'll get you to talk us through it, please, Kate, this is a social credit system at work.
There are already fit and proper person requirements around Australia in regards to who can have a firearm or not. And no one's arguing that people shouldn't at least be checked in terms of some considerations before giving them access to a firearm. But this is going above and beyond the current fit and proper person's requirements. The person's views, opinions, and attitudes, the person's way of living will now be considered when applying for a firearm. I don't know about you, Topher, but I've posted some pretty spicy things on my social media over the years. In fact, I ran a Senate campaign saying give gun owners a fair go and went after Police Minister Papalia, who is part of the author of this document. I'm really looking down the barrel of having my guns confiscated off of me because of my opinion.
Well, there's some really interesting things that just catch my eye as well. And like I said, this is very much breaking news for us as we record this here. The person's physical and mental health, discriminating and choosing whether or not someone can have a firearms license based on their physical health would appear to me to be a breach of multiple different anti-discrimination acts that we have nationwide, and I'm sure in West Australia as well. Discriminating on the basis of views, this would have to be done with a great deal of transparency. Otherwise, there is a very real risk that this is going to simply be used to politically pick and choose based on what? There's no real criteria here, are there?
Well, the person's physical aspect of shooting is an all-ability sport. I was out in the range yesterday and there are people in wheelchairs. That's part of the joy of being a shooter is anyone can do it, any physical appearance. Women outshoot men regularly at the range. So you're right, it is discriminatory in its nature and it's quite scary that the government will be able to say that a person cannot own a firearm in Western Australia anymore because their views differ from that of the state.
Now, for those that are watching internationally, you may not be familiar with the situation here in Australia. In Australia, after 1996, all semi-automatics were taken out of the hands of anyone that didn't qualify for a very difficult to get special license. You have to be a professional shooter using your firearms all the time to earn an income in order to get a semi-automatic. Everyone else is bolt action, maybe pump action, maybe a straight pull, something like that. We also have limitations on the size of magazines. Every weapon is registered. Every single owner is licensed. We already have one of the most highly regulated firearms regimes in the world. And for those that missed our report where we brought you on just a couple of weeks ago, Kate, just a few weeks ago we saw a number of firearm calibers, the actual bullet caliber being taken off the market in WA.
Yeah, and that was under the guise of people can't be trusted with them because they might snipe at police. Now, there's never been any incident of that in Australia, and it actually disarmed veterans who like long-range shooting because that's what they're good at. So Western Australia is a very scary time for the future of shooting and hunting in our nation, and WA, I think there's bad times to come.
Well, West Australia is around about 1/3 the size of the entire continental United States. If you want to put that in international perspective, that's a single state in Australia. I always find it cute when Texans tell me that things are bigger in Texas. I just go, yeah, come out to West Australia. We've got 2 cattle stations that are the size of Texas, just if you put those 2 cattle stations together. But it's an enormous geographical area. There is an enormous amount of legitimate hunting, pest control, pig shooting. There's issues with camels and all sorts of different wild or feral introduced species that need to be kept under control. What are the practical realities that this is going to start to impose? Putting aside the sports shooters, that's important to me, of course, but putting that aside for a moment, just from a land management perspective in such a large physical area.
Well, the reality is an Australian who lives just across the border in South Australia or Northern Territory will have access to firearms that someone in Western Australia has been labelled as not trustworthy with. So someone who's culling camels up in the NT using calibers that someone across the border won't be allowed to own. It's creating very divisive divide between Australians, and it's government overreach at its peak.
Well, especially on the back of the laws that we already have in place. Is there any justification being given for the need for these laws? Have there been shootings in West Australia? Is there a long history of licensed firearm owners going postal and hurting people?
Not at all. In fact, most of the crimes committed with firearms in Australia are committed by unlicensed firearm owners with unregistered firearms. So it's targeting a problem that just simply doesn't exist. And it's a collectivist approach to punishing innocent people who just happen to like shooting or want to go out and protect our great Australian outdoors from pest animals.
Well, this is breaking news. This is a discussion paper that has been released by the West Australian Government. Kate Fantinel, thank you so much for bringing us this story. I will be crossing back to you as soon as the team gets back from the UK. We'll get another update from you on how this is progressing, whether the laws are going to be as draconian as what this discussion paper appears to be. Until then, Kate Fantinel, thank you so much for joining us once again on the Aussie Wire.
Thank you, Topher.
Our insiders are the people who make it possible for us to do what we do. They financially support the Aussie Wire, and in return they get giveaways. Not just the current merch giveaway that's open to you if you join the Aussie Wire email list. They've actually benefited from thousands of dollars worth of giveaways already, just in the short 6 months that we've been operating, and there's plenty more where that came from coming up in the next few months, including a personally signed copy of my book that will be given away to one lucky insider, signed not only with my name but also with theirs. But being an insider isn't just about the giveaways, it's also about the exclusive content, which we have lots more of coming, especially during our coverage of ARC, and it's about knowing that you're the reason why the Aussie Wire can keep bringing truth, freedom and hope to insiders and non-insiders alike. So please, take a look at the Insiders link in the description and consider becoming a financial supporter of the Aussie Wire today. Well, there's many stories to cover as we follow the aftermath of the Voice vote, but one story that we want to turn our attention to now is what gives with these institutions that came out in support of the Voice, especially the taxpayer-funded ones. I mean, it's one thing for a business to turn around and say, well, we support this particularly divisive political issue. Well, it's their money. But when a taxpayer-funded institution does the same thing, well, here at the Aussie Wire, we happen to think that that's a little bit different. Someone who's seen this from the very front seats is Professor Gigi Foster from the University of New South Wales. Thank you so much for coming on the Aussie Wire.
So much for having me, Topher.
Now, Professor, you saw as in front of your own eyes, as your own university where you do work as a professor of economics came out in support of the Voice. What are your thoughts on institutions and in particular taxpayer-funded institutions picking a side, any side, on what is a very hot political issue?
I really don't think it's appropriate, and I've gone on record saying so, not just in relation to the Voice, but even many, many years pre-COVID, there were signs that our universities, which are by and large taxpayer funded, although there are a few private universities in Australia, most of us are public. I went on record saying basically it was inappropriate that I saw the kind of political donations that were going on by universities, often to both sides of politics, actually. A lot of universities give money to both Labor and Liberal. And I just didn't understand what the point of this was. I mean, first of all, you're not a political actor. It's the people who are represented by politicians, supposedly, right? Not institutions. And secondly, why are we using this money to fund political causes? And certainly then to take one side so publicly as happened in The Voice, not just by UNSW, but by many other universities in Australia, I thought was very inappropriate. It's not the way that the public money is supposed to be spent. We are supposed to be spending money on universities to create welcoming, tolerant atmospheres in which all different kinds of perspectives and beliefs and views on political issues can be aired and discussed, and may the best ideas win. But that's not the kind of environment that's promoted when a university picks a side.
Well, of course, donating to both sides of politics is a classic move done by many large industries, whether it's pharmaceutical, banking, oil and energy, etc. They donate to both sides. They can't lose. It's just they just write off the costs. It's a tax deduction anyway. They write off the costs, and that way they've got friends no matter who wins. It certainly has a different feel about it when we see it being done with public money. But it also takes on a different feel when you've got an issue like The Voice, which is going to a referendum and is at risk of being rejected and has now, of course, been rejected by the Australian public. Where does that leave someone like the University of New South Wales, or if you'd like to talk in more general terms, where does that leave institutions that came out publicly in support of the side that ended up coming second?
Well, it's kind of an egg on face moment, isn't it? I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people who right now are trying to distance themselves and backpedal quite substantially from having so openly and so publicly barracked for the wrong side, shall we say, just as has happened with the COVID policy disaster, by the way. There have been plenty of people who were directly involved in policy decisions during the COVID era who have backed away, fled the sinking ship, tried to scrub the actual realities, the facts on the ground that, they did these things. I mean, you may have heard the new Kiwi prime minister saying that mandated vaccinations never happened in that country. You sort of have to think, are we in an Orwellian world, right? And so we've never done that, right? Yeah. Come on. We all know that happened, right? So there is going to be a very strong incentive to scrub and distance, and that's very embarrassing. But I think hopefully, the more thoughtful, reflective leaders of such institutions will recognize that this vote showed how badly out of touch the university sector is from the broad Australian population that it's supposed to serve. I hope that there are at least a few people who reflect on that.
Just on the issue of the New Zealand Prime Minister, just to clarify, that was pre-election. That was the Prime Minister that took over directly from Jacinda Ardern. There's been an election since then and a change of Prime Minister. But it's funny, you talked about scrubbing. You talked about people trying to back away from this history. I did actually jump onto the University of New South Wales website, and I'm sorry, I know you work for them, and I'm kind of throwing them under the bus a little bit here, but this really grabbed my attention. This is a Google search. I simply searched for University of New South Wales supports Voice. It gave me 2 direct URLs that are on the University of New South Wales website themselves. The issue is when I clicked on either of those 2 URLs, what I actually got was the homepage, and the URL was gone. It's been simply removed. So what I did, I took it one step further. I then used the University of New South Wales own search function, which is there on their homepage, and I used that to search for the Voice to Parliament on their website directly. There you go. I got some results. Click on the top result. What happens? It takes me straight back to the homepage. This appears to me to be an institution that is trying to, it's in damage control here, and it's flailing around trying to figure out how to handle it now that it's backfired on them.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that speaks for itself. And I will say that I'm very grateful to the university for not having fired me during this time, or even once telling me that I should be quiet about my opinion. So there is, at least in terms of its behavior, something to celebrate.
Well, that is credit to it.
Yeah, absolutely. But this kind of scrubbing and an attempt to overwrite what it stood for or said it stood for previously, first of all, it shows this Orwellian tendency to, we can just state whatever we want to today, and that'll be what was always true. But secondly, I think if I had been part of the Yes campaigning crowd at UNSW, I'd feel that was a bit of a slap in the face. I mean, how deep does their support go? Apparently not too deep. Right. So it just sort of shows it up as a marketing exercise more than really anything about principles. And of course, it was the principles that, were the flags in which this position was wrapped. Yeah. Right. I mean, we were told throughout the campaigning that the people who were not going to be voting yes were, variously racist or ignorant or stupid or, didn't care about Aboriginal people. I mean, that is slanderous. And now we see that, all that was really just marketing. And that's disappointing, obviously, from the perspective of somebody who, I guess my sort of general idea as a professional is I'm trying to search for truth. I'm trying to search for meaning and things that are solid that we can build institutions on, not just, serve people associations that then disappear when they don't seem to be politically convenient anymore.
Well, it certainly doesn't speak well of their social media and website team. I'll say that much. To have come out and said and replaced those URLs and said, hey guys, obviously the Voice result was not what we were hoping for, but we continue to work towards reconciliation. They could have put it in so many other different ways. But instead, as you say, they've just simply walked away from it, dropped it like it's a scalding hot iron, and now they want nothing to do with it. It does not speak well of them at all. Well, Professor Gigi Foster, thank you so much for coming on the Aussie Wire. We're going to have you back on as soon as I get back from the UK, because you've got a very exciting new project launching actually at the University of New South Wales that I'll be attending. I'm looking forward to that. We'll talk about that in about a month when I get back. But for now, Professor Gigi Foster, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Topher.
Well, the phrase vaccine mandates will send a shiver up a lot of people's spines, and with very good reason. But the gift that keeps on giving, New Zealand, the topic that I just seem to be unable to get away from in the last couple of weeks here on the Aussie Wire, I'm joking, we love you guys, it keeps on giving. And this topic of vaccine mandates in New Zealand just got very, very interesting. It's a story I wouldn't know about if it weren't for the excellent work of Rebecca Barnett, a regular here on the Aussie Wire. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks, Topher. Good to be here.
Now, you published a blog on this, and it kind of blew my mind in a number of different directions for a number of different reasons. But before I go down the rabbit holes that I want to explore on this particular topic, can you just bring us up to speed? What has been uncovered that you've reported on, but it was through somebody else's work? What has been uncovered about vaccine mandates in New Zealand?
Yeah, so New Zealand had pretty tough vaccine mandates, maybe not as tough as some of the Australian states, but definitely one of the tougher ones in the world. And the healthcare industry was mandated. So anyone who didn't want a vaccine had to resign or was sacked. And there's a lot of first-person accounts of being sacked or applying for a exemption and not getting it. Maybe they had a bad reaction to their first shot, and they had a similar atmosphere in New Zealand to what we did here, where medical professionals reportedly were very reluctant to give exemptions. So in that context, an FOI was released, so FOI, Freedom of Information Request, a response from the New Zealand Healthcare Provider Service, saying that there's a special type of exemption. It's for service disruption. Like if a person is a very important kind of cog in the machine, that an exemption can be issued, because if you were to lose that person out of the workforce, the whole system would grind to a halt.
Right.
And it turns out that under that special provision, that the Ministry of Health issued up to 11,005, so just over 11,000 public service health workers, COVID vaccine exemptions, which is really shocking. Yeah, it's really shocking when you consider that there are many healthcare workers who have reported that they were cut off from their livelihood and were not able to obtain an exemption. And there's a general thought that perhaps that this applied to people who were in high up positions, because those kind of higher ups, like surgeons or people who run big departments, might be less disposable, say, than an RN. And so there's a bit of a feeling that this is a letting your mates off the hook kind of scenario.
Well, of course, we need to stress we don't know that for a fact yet, but as is so often the case when Freedom of Information requests bring new information to light, they raise far more questions than they answer. Now, you've written an excellent blog about this, which is why I know about this topic. I wouldn't know about it if it weren't for your work. You wouldn't know about it if it weren't for the work of the people in New Zealand doing the FOIs, and I hope in future to be able to bring them onto the Aussie Wire as well. But for now, sticking with what we know, there are 80,000 odd healthcare workers employed in New Zealand, of which we believe about 11,000, had exemptions. Do we have any information at this point as to how many people might have exercised or acted on that exemption? Having it is one thing.
No, there's a woman called Ursula Edgington. I don't want to say her name wrong. I think it's Ursula Edgington. I have linked to her Substack in mine, so people can go and have a look at the work she's doing. She has done a number of FOIs herself, and she's been trying to piece it all together, and there seems to be information that doesn't marry up. So she's doing the ongoing effort of trawling through all the nitty-gritty, trying to figure out how many of these exemptions were actually exercised. So the bottom line is we don't know yet.
This is such important work. There's a lot of people that are very keen, especially those in power, are very keen to move on. Oh, COVID is ancient history. Don't you know we're on to World War III season now? We were on to, what was it? Russell Brand lynching season was just a couple of months ago. That's old news already. We've moved on from that even. There is a desire from those in power, those who made these decisions, to move on and to leave it all behind. Oh, it's all irrelevant. Why are we still reliving the past? But of course, for those who were mandated and chose to lose their jobs instead, or for those who were mandated and took that I daren't say vaccine, but took that therapy under duress, this is a very real and ongoing issue for them, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. If you've been coerced into taking additional shots after having a reaction to your first one, there are people reportedly still suffering physically from being put in that situation. So it's pretty galling to someone in that situation to find that others were just given a free pass. And this was secret too. This wasn't published in the media. This had to be extracted from the government by way of a freedom of information request. So there was definitely a perception, according to the reports of healthcare workers and just monitoring media reports at the time, there was a perception that no one was getting an exemption, or very few people, so don't even try. And that everyone at the top levels was just getting on with it and getting their shot and doing the right thing, and so should you. So it is pretty galling for them now to discover that secretly all along, had people in these positions wanted to avail themselves of the exemption, they could have been injecting everyone else, but not having to have it themselves. Or they could have been doing surgery on, goodness knows how many people a day, unvaxxed if they wanted to, while the people assisting them had to have it.
Well, look, we say again, we don't know for sure what the information is. We don't know for sure what the numbers would be, or who was in what position that took advantage of this exemption. We just know that this exemption existed. And it was secret, as you say. Rebecca Barnett, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention. I know you're going to stay across this story, and I look forward to getting updates from you. Ursula, if you do happen to come across this video, I don't know why you would, but if you do, well done. And we're going to be reaching out to you shortly to try and get a little bit closer to the source of the person who's really sifting through this information, and see what you're uncovering and see what else we can learn here at the Aussie Wire. Rebecca Barnett, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on.
Topher.
Thank you for watching the Aussie Wire News. We release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. You can catch up on past episodes at theaussiewire.com, and make sure that you check out our blogs and also join our email list so you're in the running for that $300 Aussie Wire merch giveaway. And finally, please consider becoming an insider, a financial supporter of the Aussie Wire, to help us continue to bring truth, freedom and hope. I'm Topher Field, and this is the Aussie Wire.